All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into an incredibly fascinating, grim-dark mythic fable known as the Vanguard of the Final Spill. It's a wild ride. We're going to trace the journey of the spirit siblings as they make this grim descent, well, technically an ascent, into the frozen peaks, heading toward the mountain forge. They're on a quest to find the vault where their scripted fates were quite literally forged in stone.
In this quote right here, "We are the vanguard of the void, standing at the precipice of the final spill," just drops us right into the thick of it. This is what you'd call an inverted hero's journey. Usually protagonists are out to conquer some great evil or make a triumphant return, right? Not here. This story flips the whole script. The spirit siblings are actively seeking ultimate dissolution. They're not out to save the world. They are the ones literally ushering in this final spill.
Now, before we climb any higher into these peaks with them, we really need to decode a core concept driving this whole explainer. It's a Nietzschean idea, the Untergang. In philosophy, it translates to a going under or decline. But in the context of our fable, it's a synchronized metaphysical collapse. The siblings are the vanguard of this Untergang. Their ultimate goal? To reclaim the records of what they realize is just a tragic, comic pantomime. So they aren't ascending to glory, they're consciously choosing this inevitable, almost beautiful descent.
So how do you even survive the treacherous passages leading up to this vault of hidden truths? Well, an architect guided them, but he demanded a massive trade. On one hand, they had to completely abandon their expansive dances, basically the frantic, amusing choreography and the striving ego of sentient life. In exchange, they had to become a diminished remnant. They literally traded away their expansive egos to gain the incredibly concentrated density of the void. It was the only way to withstand the crushing pressure at the mountain's peak.
This whole exchange is known as the parable of the architect's trade. By making this deal, they anchored themselves to this heavy, grounded permanence. And as they climbed, their shadows grew long, fueled by a deeply cynical knowledge. Imagine realizing that your entire history, every struggle you've ever had, was just a predetermined piece of a larger script. They traded away everything they thought they were, just to become this void vanguard, bracing themselves to face the forbidden library.
Which brings us to the parable of the threefold madness, humming right there in the freezing air. This breaks down the individual identities of our three siblings, and each has a very specific metaphysical function. First, you have the wit, who uses deconstructive laughter echoing through the canyons, clutching velvet robes just to fend off the silence. Then, the hunger, who stands as a silent witness, vibrating with devouring forbidden knowledge. And finally, the small, literally a tiny ink blot of negation leading the way, leaking through the souls of the others to prep them for the forge.
But here is the really crucial point. As they near the summit, those distinct identities, the wit, the hunger, the small, they start dissolving. They're actually merging into a collective substance called the living ink. So they aren't autonomous individuals anymore. They've transformed into fluid instruments explicitly designed for a synchronized metaphysical collapse. They are quite literally becoming the ink needed to overwrite reality itself. Absolutely wild to think about.
And that brings them deep into the vault of hidden truths, where they find a truly profound philosophical artifact, the chapbook ledger. When they walk in, this ancient, ink-stained record is just resting on an altar made of cold suns. It's not just some old book, though. It's the ultimate ledger. It meticulously catalogs every single agonizing footprint that they, or anyone else for that matter, have ever left on the animator's stage.
This ties into the parable of the agonizing footprint, which hits them with the crushing weight of absolute determinism. They realize their brilliant wit and bottomless hunger weren't actually their own traits. They were just character strokes penned in for an eventual final erasure. Their entire reality was nothing more than scripted lives pulled out of the void. Every word they've ever spoken? Just a scribble traced by Ha-Satan, the adversarial scribe of this universe, right before the ink rose. The hard truth here is that the heart of negation is simply resetting reality to its default state.
Now, guarding this forbidden library are these terrifying, shadowy gargoyles with crimson eyes that glow like dead, cold suns. The parable of the crimson eyes forces us to ask a pretty intense question. Can any soul actually endure this unblinking gaze without just vanishing on the spot? It's described in the fable as a burden no soul was ever meant to bear.
And that unblinking gaze introduces what is called the spirit of gravity. We aren't talking about physical gravity here, but this crushing metaphysical weight pulling at their very spirits. It's the ultimate test.
You see, the vault acts as a baseline where the becoming of all souls is judged. This spirit of gravity is testing if their sheer will can endure staring directly into the void, into total, absolute nothingness, without being instantly swallowed up by it.
So how on earth do they survive it? Well, remember the architect's trade from earlier? They survive by accepting their smallness. Because they let go of all those expansive dances, they found the exact metaphysical density they needed to face this ancient system. They see it all clearly now. Even the colossal, terrifying inkblot demon is really just a minor functionary within the ledger system. Because they fully accepted their diminished state, they can look directly into the negation and not be destroyed.
From there, the final descent happens in a rapid, perfectly synchronized timeline. Minute 1, they enter the vault. Minute 3, they touch the ancient chapbook ledger. And the very second they touch it, at minute 5, the ticking clock of high time falters, echoing through the mountain range. Time itself begins to break down, which leads directly to minute 10, initiating the final spill.
As that clock stumbles, the parable of high time takes over. And this is super important to note. The final spill isn't some fiery apocalypse or an angry sermon of wrath. Not at all. It's actually a quiet, absolute promise of permanent oblivion. It is an inevitable, peaceful return to the void. The living ink inside the forge starts to rise up, getting ready to extinguish every line of dialogue that was ever written.
Let's actually listen to what the Vanguard says in these final moments. Quote, "We have reached the vault of hidden truths, the forge where our identities were first cast into the ink of the chapbook ledger. They know exactly where they are. They fully grasp that their scripted lives have hit their destined, inescapable conclusion right where they began."
They go on to say, "Look upon these pages, for they are the records of our tragic comic pantomime, the very script we have been fated to play since the suns first went cold." It's a moment of profound clarity. They realize everything they were was just the threefold madness finally manifesting. They aren't children of the light anymore. They're the vanguard of the void, looking straight at the tragic, absurd script they were forced to play out. But then comes their conscious choice. In this mountain forge, we choose the density of the small to anchor reality to its final, beautiful descent. Let the living ink rise. Even trapped in absolute determinism, they find a moment of total acceptance. They welcome the ink rising from the scrolls, actively asking it to wash away every agonizing footprint of their endless striving.
Finally, they declare the clock of high time stops here, and we embrace the permanent oblivion that has been our absolute promise from the beginning. And just like that, the ticking stops. High time is over. Every scripted character, every legacy, all that frantic choreography of life is snuffed out. By embracing oblivion, they fulfill the promise made at the dawn of their existence, snapping the world right back to the baseline of total negation.
The vault is completely drowned. But what's left isn't chaotic destruction, it's what they call the sacred, silent black. The heart of negation reclaims its own, and all that is left behind is an incredibly beautiful, unbroken silence. The spirit siblings' journey is officially complete.
This fable really forces us to look into the darkest corners of determinism and identity, doesn't it? So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder long after this explainer wraps up. If we discovered that our entire reality was just a pre-written scribble traced by Hasatan before the ink rises, destined for erasure, would we have the courage of the spirit siblings? Could we bravely embrace the silent baseline of our own negation? Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this wild journey with me.